Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Effects Loop. I'm your host, Jay Byrne, and this week I'm doing a sort of a retrospective look at the band Ghost, because that's where my head's at. Literally last week, it's like April 25th, I think was the date. Ghost's new album, Skeleta, came out. And I've been a huge fan of the band Ghost for pretty much since the inception of the band. I'll explain that as we go on. But I've got my entire Ghost collection here. I did have everything on vinyl up to Impera, but I ended up selling off my vinyls just because, honestly, I didn't find the vinyl releases to... See, for me, vinyl is about quality, so if the album sounds better on vinyl, then I'll have the album. But with Ghost, honestly, the best way to listen to them, I think, is the CDs. I found pretty much the albums to be subpar pressings. They weren't the greatest sounding records. Impera sounded pretty good. And I can't speak for the new album because I don't have it. But they just feel like, it feels like they're just merchandise. That the albums, because Ghost is about merchandise. There's a lot of merchandise involved with Ghost. Plushies and vinyl and collectibles and all this stuff. So it kind of feels like, at least with the CDs, you're getting the final master of the album, the way the album sounds, as opposed to the vinyl where they don't always sound that great. Most of the time they're colored vinyl. They seem kind of cheaply made, to be really honest with you. So I did have all those. I don't anymore, but I do have every single Ghost album and EP on CD, including the movie, and I have the 45, the 7 inches of Satanic Panic 45. So essentially this is the entire Ghost collection right here. So we're gonna go through this and we're gonna talk about Ghost because why not? It's where my head's at. It's what I felt like talking about this week. So yeah, let's get started here, okay? This album, the first album, Ghost, Opus Eponymous, all right? If you're familiar with this album at all, you would know songs like Ritual, Elizabeth, like those are kind of like the two obvious songs on here. Yeah, that Prime Mover, Death Knell. It's a great album. Oh, of course, Conclavi Con Dio, because they still actually play that song. This is a great album, okay? I originally heard this album through my friend Peter Lambert. He sent me like a folder of MP3 files and says, he's like, I think you'll like this album. This was back in, it's hard to see the dates on these albums because they're written in really small print. But this is pretty early on. Is there a date on here? It says 2011. I don't know if that's just this repressing or not. But regardless, this was released in the early 2000s. And yeah, 2011. I think that's when this album was released. Whatever. It was in 2000. I'm not gonna go crazy about the years or anything like that. I was sent a folder of MP3s through my best friend Peter, my other bandmate in a band called Nerdy Warts. And he's like, I think you'll like this. It's kind of like Merciful Fate King Diamond-y. And I was like, okay, cool. And I checked it out and I really did like it. And it was weird because at the time, this was a Swedish band that nobody knew about. I honestly just assumed it was a bunch of young guys who, like, you know, were into King Diamond and Merciful Fate and recorded it, because at this point we were not aware of the fact that Tobias Forge was like, you know, the founder of Ghost, the director of Ghost, you could call him, was doing pretty much all the music on his own. To the best of my knowledge, this album was recorded with him and a drummer. He did all the guitars, he recorded the vocals and stuff, and he had a friend that was his drummer and a producer, and they recorded the album, and that's how this album was recorded. But the touring band, there was a band. So it's always been Papa Emeritus 1, 2, 3, 4, Cardinal Copia, now we're at Papa Perpetua. You know, I'm not going to get into the lore. I'll bring it up a little bit, but I'm not, I know it, I'm aware of it. It's not what attracts me to the band. What attracted me to the band was the cool satanic metal aspect and the look and the style of the band. But at the time, I didn't even know. I mean, because I had MP3s of this album, and I just listened to it, and I thought it was really cool. I listened to it a bunch, and I liked it. And that was it. I kind of forgot about Ghost. It was cool, you know. And then, around the time that the album Meliora came out, I got tickets to go see Iron Maiden locally at a place that used to be called Great Woods. I think now it's called the Xfinity Center or something like that. It was 2017, I think so. And I went to go see Iron Maiden, and Ghost was opening. I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. I liked that band. I had their first album. I haven't really listened to them since then, but I liked them. And when they came out on stage, full costume, full regalia with the backdrop and the setting and everything, I was blown away. They opened with Square Hammer, okay? From the EP Popestar that was released after Meliora. And I mean, I didn't even know the song, but I was standing up singing along. I mean, the audience was loving it. I mean, they put on an awesome set. Okay, it was amazing. It was really, really freaking cool, and I was like, wow, this band is incredible. Like what? I was blown away by them, and Iron Maiden was great too, but Ghost just blew me away. I was totally blown away by the band Ghost. And it was just right up my alley. I'm like, wow, why haven't I paid that much attention to this band? So as soon as that show was over, literally like the next day, I started looking up the albums. And I picked up Meliora because I really liked Square Hammer. I ended up picking up Meliora, and Meliora, when we get to it, has, you could get a version of it that had the Popestar EP included, so I got that, because that had Square Hammer on it. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I was an obsessed Ghost fan. Obsessed. I went and rebought this on CD, and then we're going to get into the next album, Infestissumam. I can never pronounce half the crap that the titles he used, these Latin titles that Tobias Forge uses for the titles of the songs. But I was just blown away. The whole concept of using Satanism and like organized religion as a metaphor for, like, I don't know, Tobias Forge comes up with these crazy concepts. I mean, on Infestissumam, a lot of it is sexual. There's a lot of like wink wink weird content on that album. There's a lot of humor in the albums as well, at least the early albums, up to, like, say, Meliora. There's a good amount of humor involved in it. And basically, I mean, that's what attracted me to the band. So I started obsessively listening. I mean, obsessively listening to. It was this album, Infestissumam, the EP that came after it, If You Have Ghosts, and Meliora with the EP. And I became a hardcore Ghost fan at that point. I had known of them before, but I became a hardcore fan at that point. And, I mean, I haven't actually gotten a chance to go see them live, because tickets are kind of expensive, and I would love to. But, you know, maybe I'll get into that a little bit in this video. But it's just expensive, and I can't afford to go, but it's a great, I mean, I'm a huge fan. So this album is awesome. It's a great start. It is very different. This is essentially satanic metal, okay? This is like, you know, the best I can compare it to is Merciful Fate. It has elements of Merciful Fate, okay? Kind of like that very typical Fatey kind of sound to it. But yeah, so this album, awesome. Still play Ritual live from that album. It's a great song. It was like a first single. Then we get into the next album. And at this point, it was interesting because I guess there was a rapper or some other artist that was called Ghost in the United States. So when they started gaining traction in the US, they initially had to change their name to Ghost BC, because of the fact that there was other artists. Like this album has, you know, Year Zero on it, Perispera and Perispera ad Inferi, Secular Haze, Zombie Queen, Monstrance Clock. This is a cool album. It's never been my favorite album by Ghost. This is Ghost's second album, Infestissumam, okay? They also released, right around that time, this album, If You Have EP really, If You Have Ghosts, which was a cover of a Roky Erickson song, If You Have Ghosts. And it's basically covers the whole album. I'm a Marionette, which was an ABBA song. There's some other stuff. Secular Haze is live on here. So these kind of go hand in hand, these two albums. This was the next phase. Apparently Dave Grohl was involved in the recording and producing of this album. I think he played drums on this album, somewhere on the album. I'm not sure exactly where, but he was involved in the making of the EP, this EP. Not the album Infestissumam, but the EP, If You Have Ghosts. So, yes, this is a great album, and this is the point where Ghost started to develop the image a little bit more. Because on the first album, you know, they had the Papa, Tobias Forge's Papa had his image. It was more of a mask. By this album, it was a full-on mask with, like, you know, he had like an alter ego created. And that's when you start getting into the lore. The band members were always the nameless ghouls, which at the time we should have realized it, but people just were trying to figure out who the band was, and Tobias Forge was doing a good job of hiding the band from the general public. But that was gonna change, and it changed after this. So then we go from that album into the album that hooked me. This is the album when I saw them live. This is the album that really, really, really hooked me and got me obsessed with Ghost, which was Meliora. This is a deluxe version that comes with the EP Popestar included, because like the previous album, there was the album and an EP. This is just all in one package, basically. And this album, I was obsessed with this album when I first got it. Listening to it over and over. Like, I actually hated the fact that Square Hammer wasn't included on this album. Because to me, Spirit is the first song of this album, which is a good song, don't get me wrong. But Square Hammer, because I was used to the live set that I saw. I thought Square Hammer and into From the Pinnacle to the Pit was a great two-song, like, you know, punch in the face. And the rest of the EP, you know, Nocturnal Man, I believe, Missionary Man, Bible, all covers as well. It's a cover album, basically. It's kind of the way that the band went, but Square Hammer wasn't a cover. It wasn't original. And I almost feel like it should have been on this album. But I mean, this album is full of classics. From the Pinnacle to the Pit, Cerise, He Is, Mummy Dust, Absolution. Like, all of those songs are songs that are still played live to this day by Ghost. And I don't know, I feel like this is the album where the band really came into its own. Or Tobias Forge really came in, really kind of like, I don't know how to say it, just defined what Ghost was going to be. Because this album was the old Popestar EP, was when they started playing larger shows at bigger venues. A lot of club style venues that are a little bit bigger, you know? And because it was a full show with a full backdrop, and it was a great look. The band had a stage show at this point. And I just gotta say, this album is amazing, and I love this album. And if I was to get anybody into Ghost, if I was to say if somebody was to say, what album should I listen to? I like the band, but I don't know where to start. This is where to start. Meliora is 100% where to start, because it's what got me obsessed with this band. So yeah, there's not much to say other than the fact that I absolutely love this album and I was obsessed with it. And Square Hammer was the song that freaking hooked me. Like, it got me, I was listening to this so much. That's the thing with this band. whenever a new album comes out, it's like you get re-obsessed with Ghost, and it's like you're listening to it nonstop all the time, to the point where you start to annoy yourself, and you're like, listen, I gotta listen to something other than Ghost. Ghost is driving me crazy. But it's so catchy and so hooky, and such a cool thing. And at this point, the Satanic thing was still heavy in the band. This album still has, I mean, there's a song on this album called Devil Church. So, like, it's a little instrumental called Devil Church. But there was still elements of the whole Satanism thing, which was more theatrical. It was like how King Diamond used Satanism for Merciful Fate and whatnot. Although King Diamond is a real Satanist, and Tobias Forge has said in the past that he considers himself a real Satanist, although I start to question whether that was just for the image of the band, and I don't know. I don't necessarily know. I think he's just obsessed with the idea of Satanism in metal, and the imagery and all of that. Probably finds the Anton LaVey school of Satanism, the 60s Satanism, pop Satanism, to be fascinating and interesting because it's more of a philosophy and a way of life. So that's probably where the Satanism comes from with this. I don't really care. I am not a particularly religious person. I don't really believe in God or the devil, so this doesn't mean anything to me. It's theatrics. So that's how I feel. But I mean, it could affect other people. Some people don't like stuff that involves Satanism, and it freaks them out, and it almost comes across as like a bad luck thing to them. I mean, there were times where, and I can be a superstitious person at times, where I was listening to Ghost constantly, and bad things were happening in my life, and I started thinking, is it because I'm listening to this satanic rock all the time? But I don't really believe in that, so I have to wipe that from my brain and get past that point. But I loved this album, and yeah, there's not much more to say about it, really. Okay, so at that point, Ghost released a live album called Ceremony and Devotion, which was a big deal at the time because I was a big fan of their live show because I had seen them with Iron Maiden, and this was for the Popestar tour, where they were basically, this is the full, 90-minute show for the Popestar tour. And this encapsulates the first couple of albums pretty much entirely. Everything that's good, all the good stuff from those first couple of albums is all in this set. This is really where Live Ghost starts to come together. Like I said, like when they started to play more, this is where it really starts to feel like this band is going to be huge and people are going to be obsessed with it. And this is when people started getting into it. I have friends now that like Ghost, that at the time I was trying to push Ghost on people and people wouldn't pay attention to me and wouldn't listen to me, and now they're obsessed with it. And we'll get into how that all happened as we go a little further. And they love it, but I'm like, yeah, I've been pushing this band on you for years, but you just didn't want to pay attention. But anyway, this is an awesome live album. This is the first live album, there's actually two, that Ghost has released. And at the time, this was awesome. Interestingly enough, it has a different sound live because this is before the big band. Like now, Ghost has a larger band. The band wasn't as big at this point, and I think they were using more backing tracks to support their live performance. There was a little less live in this. But I'm pretty sure guitars, drums, all that was always live. It was mostly backing vocals and keys and stuff like that I think were piped through. I think, as far as I know. That's the best I can tell. When you listen to this, it does sound live. So there's definite live going on this album. But this is a great live album. Ceremony and Devotion is a great live album if you haven't listened to it. So at this point, I'm fully obsessed with Ghost. And there's a new album coming out, and the first video premieres for a song called Rats. And I gotta tell you, I absolutely loved the song Rats when it came out. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like the band could do no wrong for me at that point. I was completely obsessed, and yeah, it could just do no wrong. And that video for Rats was awesome. We had a new Papa, if you get into the lore. At this point, we're dealing with Cardinal Copia. And Cardinal Copia sticks around for a while. There had been, like, each album, there was a new head of the clergy. And as far as people knew, it was a new singer. But once, around the time of Meliora, right before Prequelle, which is the next album, that's when Tobias Forge got outed, so to speak. He had a couple of band members that were disgruntled, and they didn't think they were getting paid good enough or getting enough credit. So those band members basically outed Tobias Forge pretty much through a lawsuit, because once the lawsuit was filed, that's when all the information started to come out. So then people started to know who the band members were. And oddly enough, the band members weren't anybody that we knew. Like, that maybe if you grew up in Sweden and you were familiar with Swedish metal or whatever, you might have recognized some of these band members. But for us American fans, like, the band members, the names didn't mean anything. They were literally hired guns for Tobias Forge. And that's the way he claimed it, and he won the court case. And so, and now looking at the way that the albums have been recorded, yes, I'm pretty sure some of those musicians probably helped out with some of the recordings on the previous albums. They're probably on there. But Tobias Forge always took it as like a solo, as like his project, that he brought people in, directed them, and had them do stuff. All right. Yes, I'm sure they contributed musical ideas, but I guess the idea behind it was that Tobias wrote the songs, brought people in to embellish them, and that's how the albums were recorded. And don't ask me the names of all these people, because they're all Swedish names, and I don't know. And it's, the band has been consistent from Prequelle to current now. To the best of my knowledge, it's been the same live band. I don't think anybody has changed. I mean, at this point, we know who the band members are. We've seen their pictures. We know who the female singers are. Like, it hasn't been hidden anymore. They're credited in the movie, which we'll get to in a bit. So, yes. So there we go. But we get to Prequelle. And I gotta say, whereas Meliora was what I was obsessed with, and what the album that I would recommend for people to get into Ghost, I think to date, up to now, currently 2025, we're going into May of 2025, I think this is Ghost's best album. I think this is the most comprehensive album, the most complete sounding album. It's a bit of a concept album. It all comes together. The music is thematic in a way where it kind of guides you through the album. There are little musical motifs that are repeated throughout the album. As a guitar player, like looking at this from like a guitar perspective, this is when it starts to become like, there's guitar rock on the previous albums, but it's a lot of rhythm, and there's a few solos here and there, but this is when the guitar rock part of it starts to shine. This is when, like, it becomes like guitarist music, you know, like you can learn how to play these songs. They've got cool solos. They're good songs. This album is poppier, but it does have heavy songs as well. But this is when it all starts to come together. This is when the lore starts to become heavy for the band Ghost, and people start really focusing on the Cardinal Copia character and the story. And this is when you start getting more of those like online videos. The Ghost YouTube page has these, like, you know, story videos that come out every once in a while. This is when it really started to like just take form and come together, as far as I'm concerned. And this album is great. You've got Rats, Faith, Miasma is a great instrumental. Dance Macabre is a great song. I really love the song Witch Image on this album, and even Life Eternal is a really good song. This album is just great from beginning to end, and this is just, I don't know, it really comes together on this album. And I think this album is a great, conceptually, it deals with like the plague and like the Black Plague and rats and disease, and most of his albums start to become political, and from this point on, there's a lot of politics on the album, talking about the current state of the world, but through the lens of the past. Very Iron Maiden in that way, which is funny because I guess Tobias was a big Iron Maiden fan, toured with Iron Maiden. There's an element of that, using like history to kind of like tell modern, to blend with modern ideas. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but yeah, I love this album. This album is great. And this is when the character that he played, the Cardinal Copia character, started to become more of a goofy. It had like a humor to it, in essence. The humor was kind of brought in during when he was touring for like Popestar and Meliora and all that. The humor started to come because that's when we started to get, I don't know if that was Cardinal Copia at that point. I don't think that was Cardinal Copia. I think Cardinal Copia started with this album. But Cardinal Copia's attitude, the way he acted, was sort of developed during the previous tour. But yeah, Prequelle is an amazing album, and it's definitely an awesome album. Okay, so now we get into, I can't remember where this came out. I think this came out first, because I remember hearing the song Jesus, He Knows Me, and I actually didn't even know it was a Genesis song at first. I thought it was just a new Ghost song. And here we have another EP of covers. You've got a song called See No Evil, Hanging Around, cover of Phantom of the Opera, the Iron Maiden song, which is a great cover. And We Don't Need Another Hero. Freaking Tina Turner from Mad Max and Beyond Thunderdome, okay? It really kind of starts to show Tobias Forge's interest in like cinema and mixing that into music and stuff. But as far as the EPs go, this is the best EP. I actually like every song on this EP. I like the cover versions that he did because they're all cover songs. But you've got Television on here. It's a really cool EP, and it's the most listenable EP out of all of them. There's not too much to say about this though, but this came out and this kind of gave us a taste of what was coming, because then we get into probably the biggest era of Ghost up to this point, when like they were full on arena rock band, big shows, all that kind of stuff. This is the album Impera, okay? Now, Impera took me a little while to get used to. When I first got Impera, to me the album is a bit of a mishmash. It feels like, because there's songs on here, so like Hunter's Moon, which was done for Halloween Ends. Was it Ends? No. It's the second Halloween movie. Halloween Lives and Halloween Ends, I think. I can't remember the second name of the movie right now off the top of my head. But they were the new Halloween trilogy that came out with Jamie Lee Curtis and whatnot, that were technically attached to the original Halloween movies. And Hunter's Moon was written for those movies. It's about Michael Myers. I mean, I guess you can apply, but he talks about his sister and all that stuff. I mean, it's about Michael Myers, let's just be honest. And that's on this album. And they got other songs like Call Me Little Sunshine and, and that. Those feel like leftovers that would just needed to be included on an album. And I like those songs, and they're great songs. And this album, I think this album is just about, it was political again. It was dealing with the whole craziness of modern politics, which I'm not going to get into in this video, but this is all about the rise of an empire, sort of. And it almost seems like it's from the perspective of those in charge. You get songs like 20s and stuff like that. This is a very, very cool album that has grown on me over time. But I gotta say, after how much I loved Prequelle, I was very excited with for this album to come out. And initially speaking, when I heard Call Me Little Sunshine, I was like, okay, it's kind of Metallica-y, you know, that song. And he was on tour with Metallica around the time of this album. So that makes sense. But it didn't impress me as much. It took me a while to get into this. And this is when the fandom gets big and you start getting, like, you know, a lot of the cosplay that's involved with Ghost, people dressing up and going to the shows. I mean, it had been done before this, don't get me wrong. But this is when it really takes hold. And I think it was before this that this came out. I guess it was. It was after Prequelle. I kind of skipped something here. I went straight to Impera. After Prequelle, this is because this is the only way you can get this. This never came out on CD. Kiss the Go-Go and Mary on a Cross. Okay? This was the 7 Inches of Satanic Panic single. And it took me a while to get this because this was hard to get at first. And then it got re-released and reissued. And now you can kind of find it. But the song Mary on a Cross became like a TikTok sensation. Which is weird because I'm not even into TikTok. But it became like a TikTok sensation. And that kind of brought in a whole new group of fans. This is where the cosplaying and all that stuff starts to come from. Was this, all right? Mary on a Cross. Because a lot of people would go into the shows, they didn't know anything by Ghost but Mary on a Cross. Which is kind of, you know... It gets to the point where you're a fan of something that's sort of underground, and you're like, you do realize this was a satanic metal band, right? A satanic rock band. That there was a heavy influence of Satanism in the music, and the style of the music. But it changed. People that, you know, didn't want to pay attention to Ghost before, all of a sudden were paying attention to Ghost because of this TikTok trend with Mary on a Cross. And that was before Impera came out. And these songs are great. These songs were essentially like a side project idea. They were supposed to be the original Papa from Ghost, like the old guy. Papa Nihil is his name, actually. It was supposed to be his band from the 60s. That's why they have kind of a 60s-esque vibe to them. So it's supposed to be from the 1960s, okay? And when we get into the movie coming up, there's another song that was supposedly part of this, The Future is a Foreign Land, which goes along with these two songs, okay? So it's weird, because this is Ghost, but this is like Ghost's side project. But this is what got people into it. This was like, I would imagine, by Tobias Forge, this was essentially an afterthought. This was a fun project. And it's hilarious that the song Mary on a Cross became so popular due to this album, due to this little EP. Then we get into Impera, and, you know, like I said, that's when Ghost really takes charge. And the album has grown on me, don't get me wrong. But it wasn't my favorite Ghost album. At this point, this is when things started to change. But then, you know, being a huge Ghost fan, I'm like, you know, it'd be awesome if they put out like a live video, something, so I could have something I could watch at home, because I love to watch live concerts at home of my favorite bands. Then we get Right Here, Right Now. Then the movie comes out. Then there's a freaking Ghost movie, for Christ's sake, and I'm like, hey, you gotta be kidding me. There's a movie, and I really wanted to see this in the theater, and I never got a chance to see it. I ended up having to pay for it from this service called Veeps, and I watched it like a million times on that. And then finally it came out, and I got the 4K release, which, by the way, if I'm doing a review of this, I'm not really reviewing the 4K, essentially is defective. Like, they messed up on the soundtrack. There's some weird things where the chapters pop up on the screen with certain players. You can get it to play fine, and it plays okay. I feel like this wasn't put together very well. It looks decent. It looks great for a 4K. Honestly, I would say you're probably best off just buying the Blu-ray of this if you want this, because this doesn't even have HDR as far as 4K discs go. It does not have HDR. It's you know, SD 4K basically. But that's a whole other thing. I'm not going to get into like reviewing this, but I was so excited for this movie, and it's such a unique movie because it combines the lore. There's acting and characters in the movie, but you get the live show. Like they filmed 2 nights at the LA Forum during the Impera tour. And the Imperator, I think is what it was called, actually. And this is amazing. This is an incredible live performance. It's a really goofy and cool movie because you get the character of Cardinal Copia, and he's dealing with the fact that he's gonna be the he knows this is it for his reign with Ghost. And this is his last show. It's the last show of the tour. And there's a story going on in this. And it's a really cool story. Not only do that, but we get the soundtrack. And the soundtrack is a great freaking live album because now we get stuff from Prequelle and Impera live. If you're a fan of collecting live albums. So these went hand in hand. The soundtrack and the album. But on the soundtrack, we also got a new song. The Future is a Foreign Land, which was song number 3 of Papa Nihil's 60s version of Ghost. So it gets crazy. There's a whole freaking lore and story going on. But this was awesome. I absolutely love this. I've watched it so many times. I want to watch it again right now just talking about it. This was one of my favorite things at the time, and I was obsessed with it because I finally got Ghost live. Not only did we get Ghost live, but we got a professionally shot theatrical film of Ghost live. That's pretty amazing. That's a feat right there. You don't see that too often with bands anymore. I mean, Metallica did it with Through the Never, and I love Through the Never, and that's an awesome movie. But it's like, it's rare nowadays to see this. Yeah, Taylor Swift did it, you know, of course, the Eras Tour thing, which is weird that I'm mentioning Taylor Swift, but, like, you know, my wife's a fan of Taylor Swift, and I had to sit through that concert movie, and it's long. I like some of her stuff. I'm not gonna say she's a bad musician, but this is not about Taylor Swift, this is about Ghost. And so, yeah, so this is awesome. I love this freaking movie. It's great, and, yeah, I don't know. But we get through this, okay? And we know we've got something new coming. What's coming? And this brings us to now. And this is going to be my review of the new Ghost album. I'm going to do a review of the new Ghost album right now. So now, we are here. We are at Skeleta, which literally just came out last week. And I've been obsessively listening to this over and over again. Because that's what happens whenever a new Ghost album comes out. Regardless. I don't know where to put this album, because while I like it and I enjoy it, there's stuff on this album that doesn't resonate with me, even as well as, like, where's my Impera? It's somewhere in here. Sorry. Where is Impera? Here it is. There's stuff on this album that doesn't resonate with me even as much as this album, and this album was a mixed bag for me that grew on me over time. But it was a mixed bag. This album, I think upon first listen, is easier to swallow than Impera was. I think I like this album because this album's very synth pop, 80s, heavy metal, rock. It's all here. The Satanism element, even though the first single off this was called Satanized, is much less on this album. It's almost gone. Like, it feels like Tobias Forge is trying to push that out of Ghost. And at this point, I've watched a few interviews with him where he's basically said that Ghost is going on a bit of a hiatus. He's taking a break. For his mental sanity, he needs to take a break from all of this. And this album feels like a goodbye. I've watched a bunch of reviews by Ghost fans online, and it seems like none of them want to admit it. But the last song, I can't read it. Excelsis? Yeah, Excelsis, I think is what it's called. They're weird titles. He uses Latin words as the titles to songs in a lot of cases. And that's always been a theme throughout it all, because you've got this church theme and this Pope theme going on, but it's satanic. It's kind of convoluted and crazy and doesn't even make a lot of sense. But it's fun and it's theatrical and I enjoy it. So, but this album, there's a lot on this album that really feels like Tobias Forge, especially the last song of the album, talking down his fans. It almost sounds like, this is my interpretation, okay? I could be completely wrong. But my interpretation of him is like, you know, the fans are on the ledge and he's saying, it's okay. It's gonna be fine. You know, things have to come to an end. They have to end. Things have to change. And there's a lot of that on this album. And it feels like, while he's accepted the fact that the band has become as big as it is, and it's everything he ever wanted the band to be, the fandom is so wrapped up in this band. People are so obsessed with this band now. Like so obsessed with it, with the costuming and the cosplay. And it feels like there's a lot of fans that wouldn't be able to accept the fact that Ghost was no more. That Ghost is done for now. Like, that's too much for their brain to handle, okay? And I think this album is Tobias Forge's way of easing them into that idea. Because there's a lot of that on this album. Although this album is very 80s. What's hilarious about this album is, when I was listening to it the other day, there's some very, very 80s metal thing going on, and it made me think of Def Leppard, especially one song that's basically, it's called, what is it, Misilla Amore. The chorus is Love Rockets, which the song's kind of cheesy, and it kind of, yeah, I'm gonna admit it, it's not one of my favorite songs on the album. It's fun, but there's always been your cheese factor. But this album in some spots feels like it goes a little too far. That's my own personal opinion. But being a longtime Ghost fan, I think I deserve the right to hold an opinion on this. Okay? And while I was listening to that song, it made me think of Def Leppard. Love Bites by Def Leppard, okay? I mean, how would you not? And so immediately I thought, well, this album is like Dark Leopard. Okay? Instead of Def Leppard, this is Dark Leopard. And that's what this album feels like. It's a very 80s throwback. And I love that, because I love that era. And I like pop music from the 80s, and I like metal music from the 80s, and I like the freaking LA glam rock from the 80s, and the hair rock from the 80s, and there's a lot of that on here. There's a handful of slower songs on this album. There's always been slower songs, but they're a little more heavy-handed on this album, like the song Guiding Lights, which isn't a bad song. I mean, you've got See the Light from Prequelle, which is a great song. And it kind of reminds me of that. This album really does kind of take from previous albums. There's a bit of Meliora on here. I would say lesser Meliora, though. A bit of the stuff on Meliora that I was like songs like Majesty and stuff that I was never, they were on the album, Spirit and Majesty, but they weren't my favorite songs on the album. There's a bit of that on here. There's a bit of Infestissumam on this album, minus the Satanism. And it's a good album. I like it. As a Ghost fan, I enjoy it. I've been listening to it pretty much on repeat, so I definitely like the album. But I feel like it's time. It's time, and I mean, the new look is amazing. I love the new stage look. The new look for the band is awesome. It's really, really cool. But I feel like it's time. It's time for Ghost to take a break. I don't know if Tobias Forge will continue Ghost as we know Ghost. I can't help but think that he will, because, I mean, it's just such a big band now that it's almost impossible to just stop it. It's become its own thing. But I feel like it's time for Ghost to take a break. I mean, we've gotten so much great material from Tobias Forge and Ghost Company for the past couple of years. It has been like, for the past, 5, 6, 7 years, since like right before COVID, which I don't want to get into COVID, but this is a way we have pre-COVID and post-COVID now, the way we look at the world. If you grew up and if you were part of that and you know what's going on. It feels like since then, we've got so much great Ghost content, it's time to take a rest and just absorb what we have, because there's so much of it. And as a fan, I'm okay with that, because there's a lot to take in. There's a lot here, okay? A ton of albums here. But yes, the new album, Skeleta, if you're a diehard Ghost fan, you're going to love it. I don't think this album is going to bring in any new fans. This album is for people who are already fans of the band. And it might lose some of the older school Ghost fans because of the... It's not even really a change in direction, because it feels like all the other Ghost albums. But this and Impera feel like an extension of each other. Since Impera, it kind of become, there's a certain sound that Ghost has had, and this kind of continues that sound, or you could say concludes that sound, if it really does. But yeah, there it is. There's my my impression of Ghost, a bit of a history, a retrospective on Ghost from a huge Ghost fan, somebody who's been following them for a long time now, who's been obsessed with it, but who's also a musician and a producer at heart, and can look at things and take them for what they actually are. Not just because I'm obsessed and I love it. I can look at it from an objective perspective. And if I was to rate my favorite Ghost albums, I'm not going to rate them all, but I'm going to give you 3 of my favorite Ghost albums, okay? Meliora, Prequelle, and the debut, Opus Eponymous. Those are my 3 favorite Ghost albums. Those are the albums I can pop in anytime. The other albums are all great, and I listen to them. My least favorite, I have to say, is Infestissumam. It's always been my least favorite Ghost album. Even comparing it to the new album, I think I like the new album more than Infestissumam. It's always been my least favorite Ghost album. But yeah, that's what I think about Ghost. And if you're a Ghost fan, I hope you sat through this and listened to my diatribe. And yeah, there you go. Hi, my name is Jay Byrne. I am the creator of the Effects Loop and the SFX Loop. It's come to my attention after looking at my YouTube analytics that the majority of my viewers are not subscribed. So if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined. If you have something to say, leave a comment in the comment section below. Maybe click the notification bell so that way if I make a new video, you'll be notified and you can check it out if it's something that you're interested in. If you like this stuff, like, subscribe, and comment. And I thank you for watching and supporting the Effects Loop and the SFX Loop.